Welcome to the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers and its monthly author and artist showcase. I am your host, J.W. Capek, and today I have a pleasure of introducing an author who usually sits on this side of the table, Peter Stockwell. I first met Peter at the Barnes & Noble's author panel, and with his invitation, I joined the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers. Peter is well known in the community, and he's in this area for his teaching career of 30 years, his community services, his church activities, and now because he likes to kill people. It's all right. It's in his books.
I don't practice first.
You don't practice things. Okay. Peter, killing people in murder mysteries is only your latest specialty. You are an author of other genres as well, including a motivational and inspiring collection of your father's sermons. The second volume is newly released. What is your key to writing such a personal book and the commentary?
Well, fortunately for me, my father wrote all the sermons, which makes it very simple. I just listened to his words in the church because I had to be there. And then later, when I read through them again, the idea of what he was trying to get across to his congregation then led to what commentaries that I could write that would pertain to today. And many of these sermons that have first come out are sermons from the 1940s and early 1950s. And so do they have any kind of stance in today's society? And what I have found is they do. But the sermons had some great wealth of inspiration, and so that's really what I am trying to do, is to present this so that people can, whether they're atheists, agnostics, Christians, I don't care what faith they have, there are words of wisdom and inspiration.
I've been with Peter on various book events, and he is an active promoter of his own books and those of all the authors around him. I attribute that to your classroom experience, where every day you have to sell the idea of learning to a number of middle school students.
Well, they're middle-aged now because my first class is in their 50s. So.
Well, with all the entertainment choices available today for adults and children, movies, books, tablets, phones, streaming television, audio, gaming, music, why is it important to still read a book?
Well, for the purposes of developing our educational abilities and using our cranial strengths as we have them, reading words in a book can help to strengthen the brain and help with our abilities to think, our cogent abilities. And so I would recommend anybody, please read a book. Now, of course, being a reading teacher, I also understand that we have people who have reading difficulties, and for a number of reasons. So those people would find alternative ways to get that same material. And that's one of the reasons that I think the electronic books are good, and especially the audio books are very important, because I do have friends that are dyslexic, and they cannot read a book without losing trains of thought, being confused by the words, just finding it boring because it makes no picture in their head. There are a variety of reasons. So, but yes, reading a book stimulates the brain. It's also a way of escaping.
Okay. You developed your own self-publishing company. Is it just getting your friends and neighbors to buy your books, or how did you do it?
I was curious about the whole process, and I had done the usual things of writing query letters and sending them to agents and listening or hearing back from them that, or even not hearing back from them, that this was not something that they were going to work on. So it came to me that as and I'm computer literate to some degree, it came to me that I could go through the publishing process to actually manufacture a book, to get something like this and make sure it gets into print. I found that you can find the people that can help you do that. And So writing the manuscript, of course, is the first step. You have to have one of those. And then editing, that we had an editor that you were interviewing on one of our shows. And editing is very, very important, because I don't know an author yet who's ever said anything other than, my manuscript is crap. And some of the best names in the writing industry, that's how they feel their first manuscript is. It's just a bunch of crap. And they go to the editors and get them cleaned up, and then they rewrite and polish that story that they're making. Then, of course, you have to have a cover, so you have to have your cover designers get into this. The book has to be formatted. You have to go find your proper setup for ISBN, the International Book Number System, so that stores and libraries can actually find your book, and then they'll order it. And the print process is one that you're going to have to pay for. You have to pay for the books, especially in my case, because I'm doing my own publishing, so I have to buy my own books. And when I am out marketing, Ingram, the book distributor, can order my books, and they will order, and then wherever my print is done, that is paid for by whoever orders the books, and then I get a little cut of it. Mm-hmm. But marketing's the big deal.
Well, as a marketing guru, a teacher, an author, and the wisest of men, he told me that. I had to say
I did?
Yes. What advice would you give to beginning authors of any age?
Write the dang manuscript. Don't give up on it. Just keep writing, and you're going to get frustrated. You're going to be feeling like maybe you aren't supposed to be doing this. You're going to have an attitude of, oh, why? This is so hard. Those words aren't coming to me. I can't get them correct. The sentence structure's wrong. I've spelled incorrectly. And I said, okay, so just keep writing. Again, I'll go back to that thing we had earlier. You've got editors. We'll find them. We'll make it cleaned up.
You've said that you went to writers' conferences to learn your craft. Now, with experience, how would you recommend to look for, in the myriad of conferences, classes, and how-to books that are offered to new writers? There are so many out there. How do you pick and choose which ones will actually help you?
Well, considering the fact that I'm in the Pacific Northwest, I did go to the Pacific Northwest Writers Conference. That was the very first one I went to. I also found a book, The Fire in Fiction, which Agent Donald Moss out of New York City had written. And I came across this book. I said, that sounds like a good book to read. And so I ordered it, read through the entire book, and then found out he was coming to Bellevue. And so I went to his class. I paid I think it was $100 to go sit in his class for an entire day. Took my manuscript with me. It wasn't even finished yet, but I took my manuscript of my first book. And by the time I was done with that class, I knew I hadn't written anything really good. It was awful. So I took the advice, rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. And 6 years later, I finally was able to publish the book. So yes, the conferences are out there. It depends upon how much you want to spend, how long you want to be gone, how close is it to you. The most expensive one I've been to, only because it's not really any more expensive to sign up for it, but it's in New York City. And so there's an air flight that's in there both ways. There's a hotel room in the Grand Central Station. That's the Grand Hyatt. And the rooms are not inexpensive. But that's, so a few $1,000s later, I've met some of the big writers in the world.
What skills from your teaching career do you think translate to the discipline that writing really does require?
One of the worst things I've ever had in my entire life is organization. I've been working on it for an entire career of teaching, and now I'm working on it an entire career of writing books. But organization is a big deal. You have to be organized in order to get things accomplished. And the other part of it is, because I was a teacher, planning became a very big deal. When you're planning a book, we're not planning on just sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to write this time every day, I'm going to write this long, et cetera, et cetera. That may or may not work out. However, you need to understand that in 6 months, you need a manuscript. So plan during that 6 months just when you're going to actually sit down and write the book. And if you can get 1,000 words out a day, 1,500 words out a day, 2,000, so be it. It doesn't have to be every day, but get as many words out as you can and plan what you're going to be doing when you get that manuscript finished. And during the course of that writing time, you're also going to want to line up your editors, line up the person who's going to make your cover, get your ISBN in order through Bowker, and make a synopsis, find people who will read your book as beta readers and who will also then give you reviews that you can then put in the book, or at least on a website or whatever social media you're using, you can put those people out there to say, you really need to read this book.
Well, going from your teaching, how did you transform into a murder mystery writer who focuses on killing people? How about Marcus Jefferson and that newest story, The Garden of Eden?
Well, In the Garden of Eden is the 5th of my series with Marcus Jefferson, and he's not actually introduced until the 2nd book, because when I wrote the 1st book, all the characters that were being investigated by Marcus said, well, you've got all this backstory, why don't you write a book about it? So I had to write I wrote the 1st book second, but it got done. And then I worked my way through with Motivations being that 1st book, which was written second, and Motive, which was the 1st book I wrote, but is the actual investigation and introduces Mark Jefferson. And then, of course, there was a nugget of an idea in there built in with some family history that I had that I had decided to put into a book. And just for those of you who are out there, my ex-wife is still alive.
Okay, but now where does that lead to the Garden of Eden?
Well, then I came up with an idea that Mark had an uncle in Snohomish County. His name was Jeremias Jefferson, and he was involved in an undercover sting to take down a drug cartel in Everett, working on the waterfront. Didn't go well. And so I had Jerry get kicked off the police force and commit suicide, which Mark never believed he did. So he's going to investigate with his father, and that brought in Tiberius, who is Jerry's older brother, and he's a sergeant in Seattle. And so we now have a family affair thing going on, and that became quite interesting, because not only do you have his father, Mark's father, Tiberius, and his uncle, he's also got his cousin JJ, who is on the Snohomish County Police Force, and their wives, children, and all of this becomes part of the story, and the adventures or misadventures or the tragedies that are happening to this family because of this one invasion of one drug cartel in Everett. That, of course, once we found out what happened to Jerry, they wanted to go on vacation, which is Joan, his wife's, real concern that they were going to miss this trip to Anchorage, Alaska on a cruise ship. They didn't. They made it. And of course, you know.
And you got the book out.
We got the book out. And so then the author who's aboard the ship, James Blackthorne, unfortunately dies. And we find out that it could be under mysterious circumstances, because Jones examined the body, and when the ship's doctor declares he's had a heart attack, and she says to her husband, that wasn't natural, he was poisoned. You should investigate. And Mark says, not my ship. That's never stopped you in the past. So he gets involved in that. And then, of course, that leads up to in the Garden of Eden, because in my research of how to kill somebody aboard a ship and make it look natural, I came up with honey. Now, who would ever suspect that honey could kill somebody?
You would.
Well, I had looked it up in my book. You know, you talked earlier about books. I have a book of poisons.
Oh, good.
And in that book of poisons is granotoxin. And granotoxin's a paralytic and will cause all kinds of problems. And it just happens to be running through all the roots and stems and leaves and flowers of the azalea family, which includes our rhododendrons. So we can make that honey. It's called mad honey. And that's...
Well, I would think to write a mystery or so many mysteries, you'd have to put a great deal of structure into the plot. Now, that's partly of planning. Do you outline the whole plot, or do the characters create as they go along?
Yes.
Yes, all of the above. Okay.
It's that. I am what is probably called a plotting pantser, in that I will have a general outline of where I want the story to go and what I would like to have it accomplish. I know where I'm headed with it, but the pantser part of me is I sit down and start writing and characters take over. I know you've heard many authors who have said characters take over and they start writing for you, and you have to do what they're asking mostly. I don't always let the characters take over.
Well, you do have some plot planning to do then.
Yeah.
You and Mark Miller have been instrumental in establishing the local authors program with Bremerton Access Television. Besides giving a platform for literary artists and writers, you're creating Halloween and Christmas programs. Are you two switching from writing to producing?
I'm not switching. It's just another aspect of marketing.
Okay. What is your biggest surprise in your work with the local authors?
That there are so many of us. I mean, I knew that we had authors in the area that were fairly well known, and but the number of authors that are here and have an actual career that they are making out of it, that they're actually selling enough books, electronic or otherwise, that they can actually have an income from it. And there are quite a few of these authors out there. And it was surprising to me to find out how many there are. We're talking not dozens, we're talking hundreds.
Mm-hmm. Well, with all of your promotional activities for yourself and Claw, how do you find time to write?
It's part of the day.
It's part of the day.
I just sit down. As a matter of fact, this morning I was writing. I'll write, I get up around 6 o'clock, and so I'll spend a little time goofing off and doing some crossword puzzles in the newspaper, read the paper, and then I start writing. And I'll write for 2 or 3 hours and then let it go. Or I'll even, if I don't get any writing in the morning, I will write late at night. There are times when I have stayed up till midnight, 1 o'clock, just writing, because the story has to be told.
What writing projects are going on right now, and are you considering changing your genre? I see this book waiting to be discussed.
Well, this is my new book. This is the cover. It's called The Mistress, and it is about a young lady. As it says on the back of the book, Siggy Weatherman is stunningly beautiful, so capturing attention has never been a problem. The thing is that she's targeting certain men, and this book takes place in the future. It's towards the end of this 21st century, and things have not gone necessarily well in the world in terms of climate change and government and such, and so things have become much more tribal in the world. And we have her with a group that is trying to control what's going on in the world and looking really basic for world dominance, world supremacy. And she's kind of special. You'll have to read the book to find out just how special she is. The whole premise is that because we're doing things in the future, she will sedate her date. And then a crew comes in and they implant in the base of the brain a chip. And then the chip, with its futuristic kind of nanocells, will then move out and connect to various parts of the brain so that she then has a control of them. Because she has a form of telepathy that she works with that chip and can influence their memories or their actions or what they're thinking.
Now, this sounds like a change in your genre. You're talking about the future. Is this science fiction?
Yes, it'll be
science fantasy? Is it fiction fantasy in the future? What is this going to be?
Well, the funny part about this was the other day on NPR they were discussing chips in the brain to help control brains that aren't functioning quite properly. And I thought, well, that's where I'm headed.
It's current
events.
events.
It is a current event, but I'm taking it the next level where she actually gains control of the people. Of course, the question is, who's controlling her? And so if, does she have a chip in her brain? Does she not know about?
We'll have to read
You'll have to read the book and find out.
Find out. Okay.
Or is she special in another way? Anyway, I'm maybe 10% into this book, and I know where it's headed. I know where I want it to go. Siggy keeps talking to me. And I have no doubt that I want to talk to her.
Did you have time, or do you still have to research to create your locales? So many of your books are located here in the Puget Sound area. Do you still have to research the area?
Oh yeah, I still research to come up with just exactly where places are. I mean, I know most of where the places are that I've used in my books, but there are times when I want to make sure that I am accurate about which hotel they're in, how far up the road in Aurora Avenue it is, whether it's the right flower company or the right. Well, I couldn't use the cruise line that I had interviewed. One of my former students works for a cruise line we will not mention, but I'm sure everybody in the Seattle area could figure out which one it is. Anyway, he's a public relations director for them, and so we had a conversation before doing Deathstock's Mr. Blackthorn. And you want to get the details as correct or at least believable as you can. I have a good friend of mine who has a bee operation and honey producing over in Silverdale, and I talked with her and talked with one of her store managers, and everything went just fine to come up with mad honey and how it can be put together. And so, I mean, we're stretching a little bit here, but it did happen. I mean, back in about 534 BC, the Greek army was wiped out pretty much by the Turks when the Turks were giving them mad honey, which is the product of the azalea and the Luteum azalea, and they got sick.
After reading your book, I noticed it was just the right time of the year that we have a huge, huge rhododendron in our backyard that was filled with gorgeous blossoms, and there were lots of bumblebees buzzing and buzzing around, and I wouldn't go in that part of the yard.
You won't find honeybees touching that flower.
Well, anyway, I won't touch that flower either after reading your book.
Well, don't eat it. You can still touch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just don't eat it. Ingesting it is where the problem becomes, where the toxin is laced through your body, and as I say, it's a paralytic. There have been reports of animals that have been cows and such, dogs, cats, that have been taken to the vet because they have munched on the rhododendron leaves, children that have gone to the hospital for serious complications. And there actually have been a couple of deaths recorded in history. I just expanded it to the fact that we can actually do it still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you so much for being on our program and letting me interview you. This is kind of a different experience, I think, for both of us, and I do appreciate it.
Well, it's been a couple of years since Mark interviewed me last, so yeah.
And you've been very, very busy, obviously, from the books that you've listed. You've been very busy, plus all the work that you do with Claw and with BCAT in promoting the local writers and authors and artists who are very numerous here in this area. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for sharing with us. I look forward to continuing our endeavors Kitsap literary artists and writers. I'd like to thank all of the viewers again for tuning in to Bremerton Kitsap Access Television and viewing this CLAW presentation. I wish to thank the BCAT staff and on cameras and in the director's chair. Our broadcasts are scheduled for Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific Time on Wave Cable Channel 3 and Comcast Channel 12. Keep in touch with the Facebook and web pages to discover where you can meet with local authors and artists. It's always a pleasure for the artists and authors to meet with someone, to talk with them, to discuss their books, and to ask them questions. What were they getting out of the books that you wrote? It's also possible to stream the CLAW program live through www.bcat.org. And we hope everyone has a pleasant evening, a productive and creative week, and you're going to listen or read a very good book. Until next Saturday, I am J.W. Capek with the literary artists and writers in conjunction with Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. And now I get to shake your hand and say thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Okay. Good night.